It's that time of the week again, folks. This is me, your host, Richard McColl, here in Bogota, Colombia, 2,600 meters close to the stars, although it feels like we are in a permanent cloud and horizontal rain these days. Yes, well, that's Bogota, and that's this time. This is what's going on at the moment. But our very special guest is in Tenjo, so not very far away at all. Heather Luna, well, half Colombian, grew up in Michigan, spent a significant time in the United Kingdom, and is now in Tenjo, so just outside of Bogota. Welcome.
Thank you so much. But the minute you said a cloud, it started pouring with rain here.
Well, it is. I have a grey cloud that follows me around, but when it comes to technology,
Oh dear.
and like using a printer,
Right.
using a printer. Anyway, I digress. But yes, it's coming in now, and I'm going to have to go outside soon and pick up my children. But that's another story.
Yes.
What brings you, after all of these years elsewhere, what brings you to Tenjo? Give us a little bit of a background as to who you are, Heather.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me on. My father's Colombian, and he emigrated when he was 17 from Bogota to Michigan, where he met my mother, who's like white US. Her people came in the 1600s from England to colonize and all of that. They met and had me. And I think because of everything that was going on in Colombia at the time and through the 90s, etc., he wasn't keen on like speaking Spanish to me, or I didn't feel Colombian. It felt like my dad is like, oh, my dad's from this other place, but I didn't really feel it too much. And I did come when I was 4 years old, and I have like a couple of memories of that, but that's it. So it's when I saw my grandmother for the first time after like 25 years. She went to my brother's wedding in Florida, and I saw her, and I burst into tears when I saw her because I was very close to my other grandmother. And then to see her and think, I don't know anything about this woman, and she's also my grandmother. So that really inspired me to come here. So I came here. That was 2003 that I came here. Had my 33rd birthday here and met all this huge family, these uncles and cousins that I never knew. And it was just so incredible, so warm. On my mom's side, it's a very tiny family. So to come here was so overwhelming, and it was beautiful. And I love the weather, like the 17, 18 degrees is perfect for me. And so I just really loved it. But I had just got married and had just moved to England.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as if it was like in the cards for me to move here. But I did fall in love with it. And then I was in the UK for 17 years. I had a daughter out there, and something about becoming a mother made it even more important that she could have like a life here in Colombia with this huge family that I have.
Yeah.
And we did try to move here in 2012 for a year. We were living in Cedritos, but I couldn't figure out how to make a living. So we moved back to England, and then I was coming here every 2 years for a couple of months. But finally in 2020, I did it. I'm here. I've been here nearly 5 years, and I just love the culture. I love my family. I have a partner here now, and yeah, it's good. I mean, it's been raining a lot, but
Hey, it happens. It happens in Michigan. It happens in the UK. It
true.
happens in Colombia. Is that?
Very true.
What can I ask? Were you married to a Brit?
I was married to two Brits, actually.
Oh, I'm so
I
sorry.
divorced two Brits. Yes.
Oh my! Oh my!
That
Won't
one
tell.
that brought me over there, and then we divorced, and then I got another one, and I had the daughter with him. Yeah, no, lovely people. I'm still friends with them in case they're listening. But yeah, so I have a lot of experience with, yes, British men.
Oh boy!
I
Oh
know
boy!
all about you.
Oh well. Let me just say I'm half Canadian, so let's put that out there as well.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Although that's therein lays a similarity to you, is that I really didn't know anything about my Canadian family. And they're all, I mean, they're older than me, and I didn't know my cousins, I didn't know anything. And it has been a search in recent years to connect more with them. Since both my parents are long passed on, um, I was very close to my maternal grandmother and the great aunts on that side, and with very, very small family on that side. But I was close to them, but with almost no connection to my Canadian side. So it's been very nice in latter years to connect. Again, not a big family, but it's interesting that you bring up the issue of your daughter and her having this family. Is that my oldest son, who is 10, he's the sensitive one out too. I've got a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old. The 5-year-old's a little barbarian. The 10-year-old, he's very sensitive, and he's the one who wants to meet the more distant family. But they are surrounded, of course, not in Bogota, but in the Costa in Colombia, with I don't even know how many cousins and aunts and uncles. And actually, my wife doesn't even know how many aunts and uncles. And it's going to be a big test. This 30th of December, the grand matriarch of the family, so the grandmother, my wife's grandmother, who had no less than 12 children with the same man, which is sometimes unusual, she turns 100. And
amazing.
so there's going to be an epic party.
Yeah, my grandmother's going to be 95 this year, but she only managed 8 children with the same man.
Oh, only. It's just the mind boggles. It's like I'm struggling juggling 2.
Yeah.
But again, these were different times as well. These were different times, and sad to say, children weren't expected to survive a lot of the time. And then, should they survive, they were expected to raise their siblings as well, and then work. So again, different times altogether rather than this. So it must have been like when meeting that grandmother, essentially for the first time, really, when you said the wedding in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite special. There's something pretty. I bet you didn't leave her side for that whole event.
Yeah, no, it was amazing, except that I really couldn't speak Spanish and she doesn't speak English. So that's been a new thing. I mean, I did study a bit of Spanish in college, university, just lightly. And then after that, it was through, like Duolingo and stuff like that a bit. But it's really this year that I've felt that, no, I'm ready. I'm living here. I actually want to work here. So I'm starting to work here. Because until now, I've been working virtually internationally, mainly with the UK. So, it just feels like, I don't know, I've been here 5 years. It's time to really live here.
Well, I think that is, creating a business, really feeling that you've put down roots. 5 years is a good watershed moment. You know where you are. Also, I find part of your story, which I've heard on numerous occasions, but it's a truthful one, is this, what conditions did your father leave Colombia under that led him to reject not being Colombian, because he's always going to be Colombian. He's always going to have his idiosyncrasy, but not to speak Spanish to his daughter and son, presumably, and not to impress upon them the family, those links available. And I think, you have to think about this and what is such a situation that you don't want this to be part of their lives, really. You want to protect them. It is a security blanket.
Yeah, I think part of it was the US is that there's discrimination against people with an accent, who sound like they're immigrants. So he was avoiding that for me.
Okay.
And I understand that, but it's tough. I would love to be fluent and have been able to communicate with my family all this time.
Yeah, I mean, it would have it would make a huge difference. It would definitely. But now you're on the other side now.
I am.
As you said, you're on the other side. You're settled, setting up a business. You need to speak Spanish. I mean, there's no two ways about it. I'm sure there's some obviously English speakers nearer to where you are and so on. But in order to immerse yourself entirely and to make a life of it, Spanish is key. And we know well that. And again, it's not a criticism of Colombia, but let's say English language expertise is lower here than in other Latin American countries. It's not been, I guess, needed as much, aside from maybe if you're in a multinational or so on. For obvious reasons, Colombia has been divorced from the idea of international tourism for a long time and migration. This issue of having an accent in the US would have been something of concern all those years ago. Then I would have said it probably wasn't a concern, and I would say today it's even more of a concern.
Yes.
I don't even want to try and get my head round. I think you're in the right place. I think you probably look and say, "Oh, thank God!
I'd rather be here." Yes,
I'm neither in Brexit England and I'm neither in the US right now.
Things are not looking very good for the UK at the moment, so I'm happy to be here.
Now, these 17 years in the UK were really formative, because what you are doing now stems a lot from what you were doing there. Perhaps you could give us a bit of a background.
Yeah, because when I left the US, I'd been teaching economics at some universities in New York, and that was my thing, I guess. But then when I got to the UK, partly, the culture there, at least back then, was very green, like people really care about the environment, and it was really lovely to see that kind of that the orientation towards loving the land so much, and that really spoke to me. And so I did go into education for sustainable development first through economics, where I was supporting economics lecturers in the UK who wanted to embed sustainability in the curriculum. But it very quickly moved into where I was a project coordinator for all the subjects, supporting all of them in trying to embed sustainability in the curriculum across all the universities in the UK. No small task. I was just a project coordinator. I was just like managing these different projects for people, for lecturers who had ideas for ways of doing it. And I did a few things that were related to institution-wide sustainability changes and all of that. I founded a transition town just at the time when Rob Hopkins was launching them, which is how a town can respond appropriately to climate change and depletion of oil and, that kind of thing. And so I was really active in that. And then I guess the next big step was 2005, what I call the racism crisis of when, lots of refugees were coming across to Europe. And I felt so powerlessness, and other people around me did as well. And I went to Calais Jungle, to see what it was like for the refugees in France who were waiting to find a way to get across to the UK. And spent a few days there, came back. I was living in Lincolnshire in the UK, which wasn't at the time a dispersal area for asylum seekers. nor were they taking in Syrians. They weren't a resettlement area either. So we started a campaign, and I founded an organization so that families like mine in Lincolnshire could host asylum seekers and refugees from other cities in the UK for short breaks. So we were taking in people from Leeds, from Leicester, and getting to know people. We had a couple of young men that came every month for several days a month from Eritrea and from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and just wonderful experience. I had people staying with us from Iraq, from Afghanistan, Iran. It was a great experience. And so it was at that point when I started to notice cultural differences, even though I'd been in the UK for like 12, 13 years. I suddenly started to see the UK through the eyes of these other folks coming. And I realized that I myself had felt, not unknowingly, but had felt some, I don't want to call it discrimination, especially when I was like in Louth in Lincolnshire one day, and some teenage boys were having lunch, and they were, goofing around. And one of them said, "Do you want some salad?" Like just to me, a stranger. And I said, "No, thanks. I already ate." And he goes, "Are you American?" And I was like, "Yes." Like old enough to be his mother, definitely. And he's like, "Can I hug you?" So there was like positive discrimination in a sense for some of it. But what I mean is that I have kind of a stereotypical US attitude of like, "Oh, is there a problem? Let's fix it." Like, and I got into so much trouble in villages in the UK with that attitude. People like, "Oh, how dare you try to help teenagers here? How dare you get a grant to put Wi-Fi into the village hall?" Kind of thing. So I feel like I'm still recovering from the UK experience of where my personality or my culture, I think, my background was told that I'm like too much, like tone it down. Like, why are you so, like, why are you so, I don't know, like, I'm trying to think of the right word, but why are you so excited to solve problems? It's kind of what it felt like. And then at the same time, I was seeing that like these like white middle class English families, wonderful people, but they didn't know how to be like, I'll say, Colombian, in the sense of like really welcoming and really like open arms and friendly, and yeah, let's spend the whole day together. Instead, they were sort of treating it like, "Hi, yes, welcome to the house. Here's the fridge." And it was like, oh no, like they were there to spend time with this family, right? And so those are just some of the examples. And so I became really interested in cultural differences and ended up starting to do work in that area, looking at culture, looking at racism, began looking at, how people with long-term health conditions, mental health issues, disabilities, neurodivergence, how the culture hurts them, and supporting businesses and people with those identities as well, like how to navigate the workplace, how to, for organizations, how to become more inclusive, how to cope with many different cultures, and not just cope, not just tolerate, but actually embrace the chance to be exposed to different perspectives and different ways of working so that the organization can actually improve. So that's kind of the, I went from doing economics in New York to going into this field. And so yeah, it's been several years now that I've been coaching. I coach like white middle class folks who are trying to figure out like how to do good in the world and how to navigate their identity, especially if they're trying to be an ally to other people with less power and privilege. And then I also run like support groups and do coaching for people with marginalized identities to support them in their work, in their lives. And then also, like I say, organizations, like organizational change and feedback culture. Because if you look at any issue that an organization or business is having, it always leads to that there's kind of a monoculture that isn't healthy going on, that means that they're not getting the best thinking out of everybody. And that can be related to issues of racism, sexism, all of that. It doesn't have to be, but it's all connected because it's about the culture of the organization. And so that's what I've been doing for the last several years. And now I've learned enough Spanish to try to do it here as well.
It sounds like quite fulfilling, when you make a breakthrough. When we just go back a little bit, you spent time in the Calais jungle with the refugees. I wanted to ask, with the refugee crisis that has taken place here due to people fleeing Venezuela, have you been to Cucuta and seen what has been going on there? I mean, it's less now, but
Yeah,
what it
I've heard
was.
it's less now. No, I
Yeah.
haven't been there, but it's
Hmm.
something that, I feel like an ache and a longing that I'm not in the UK and able to do that work anymore. And so when I think about what's going on here, I haven't figured out how to do that, especially from here. We do have Venezuelans here where I live, and we have indigenous folks who come in to work like in the flower industry and things like that. But that is part of what I mean about now I want to live here because I've just been living so much on Zoom, working internationally. And as I'm getting more comfortable with, speaking Spanish and in the vocabulary that I want to be able to use for the kind of work I do, I absolutely want to figure out how to take the experiences I've had and see how I can be of service here.
Yeah, I think if you are working like as coaching or doing support groups, and you're doing it through Zoom, like obviously the great Zoom that saved us through the pandemic, and all the other ones. But if you're doing that, you're almost living parallel to the place where you're actually physically. Sure, you can then go to the village shop or the tienda del pueblo and share a few words, but your day-to-day existence, professional, let's say, is parallel. You're not really engaged. So yeah, I can see why that there's that need now to sort of break through the. I also want to ask, well, before we go on, when you were doing all this was project management in the UK, you were doing it for many, many universities or a selection?
I don't know if you know of, there used to be something called the Higher Education Academy in the UK, and it's like an umbrella that supported all the universities with all sorts of things related to education. And so my job was with them. So I was the project coordinator for education for sustainable development for the Higher Education Academy, which meant that they already had like a maths section, an economics section, an English section. And my job was to support like the person who was doing education for sustainable development for each of those subjects, support them, but then also like put out a funding call. We've got money available for grants for any lecturer in the UK who wants to develop some idea for the curriculum. And so that's why. I know that would be much harder to do in another country. And I think it's gone now. I think the Higher Education Academy is no longer there.
Yeah, I'm not familiar, but I'm very happy you said maths and not math.
Yeah, I'm still
You're
very
still
British
British.
in my
But
vocabulary.
can we just say, because it is mathematics, it's not mathematic, it's mathematics. Anyway,
Exactly.
moving, it's one of my bugbears
Yep.
there. I only ask because I know that the university, Exeter University, has a one planet MBA,
Yeah.
which is very well attended and sought after. And in fact, Colombian students, there's a scholarship for 2 Colombian students every year,
Oh,
fully
wow.
paid,
Great.
with all flights and what have you.
Nice.
And the idea is that they return. Unfortunately, young Colombian women go over to England and stay because they get married, whereas the men usually come back. But yeah, anyhow, that's I was thinking of that one. Now, I want to get very quickly. Coaching seems to pop up a lot, and in particular in online fora. I don't really understand what it is because there seems to be so many different types. I mean, there are people on LinkedIn saying that they're coaches for something, and life coaches. How does this work? I don't understand, Heather.
Yeah,
Clarify it.
I think there are different kinds of coaches. All I can speak to is my kind of coaching, which is a bit like, it could be where someone is, feeling stuck about something. It could be career-wise. It could be stuff happening at work. It could be, it's more rare for me, but it could be personal stuff. Like some people can bring personal stuff into the conversations. It's usually around, well, not usually. Sometimes it's around how to communicate, like how to have difficult conversations with people they work with. There could be different, like a power dynamic going on that makes it hard for someone to say something to someone. It could be that people are feeling ungrounded, like with everything that's happening in the world right now. People could be feeling, I don't like what I'm doing. Like, what could I be doing so that I'm more connected with what I care about, what's important to me? And so I can take them through a whole process around that. It can be around like perspectives on, I think that I have a perspective that I would call liberatory. So it's like anti-oppression. It's about what kind of world do we want, can we have, that means that we get to be who we want to be, do what we want to do in a way that is good for everybody. Like it's a very community-based, communal-based. And so I think people can be attracted to that perspective. And so they want support in how to take that on for themselves. So it can be just a bit of like a conversation around perspective. So it can be work related. And then something new that I'm doing for Colombians is that I do have some experience with supporting people who know a lot of English but need to improve.
Yeah.
And so something that I like doing is kind of, and I would consider this coaching because I don't like teaching English, but coaching. And that would be where I'm like, say, having a conversation with you, Richard, about moving house or something, and you're talking about where you feel stuck. And I'm supporting you in that. And if you aren't fluent in English, but you're pretty good, I would also support you in working with you on where you need to improve. So through the coaching, I would also be able to say, I see the pattern of something that you're making a mistake in English, and I can help you work on that. So I like having it based on what's important to people. That's why I don't like teaching it like as a normal, like, oh, I'm going to teach you how to speak English from scratch. No, I prefer where it's like someone talking about something they need to talk about. They need to talk about things going on at work. They need to talk about their life choices or something like that. And then I can as well support them with English, but I can also do it in Spanish. But yeah, the point is that it's what's on people's minds, like what's eating at you throughout the day. And you get to have someone who can give you like an outsider perspective, a wider perspective, take you through processes that might be able to support you in making sense of it and figuring out what next steps are going to be.
Do you have like some formal background in psychology?
No, I've been part of a organization for nearly 20 years that does peer counseling.
Okay, okay.
So there is a bit of that. And a lot of the kind of my own learning has come from folks with that kind of background. So there is that sense of like having an underlying philosophy of what it means to be human. I think I base all my work on, like we're born pretty good, there's nothing innately bad about us, and yet a lot of people carry around some pretty tough ideas about themselves, like I can't do maths, I'm not good, like things that get thrown at us when we're in school that really can impact our being able to have like the biggest life possible.
I see that. Oh, I carry all sorts of trauma. Maybe we can talk offline. I got all sorts of trauma here. We're discussing this offline with last week's interviewees. In fact,
Right.
we were like, "Oh my God, yeah." That suddenly I realized, oh, wow, there's trauma from this and trauma from that and trauma
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah.
But and you work out how to bury it,
Mm.
and then it does come back. It really does.
Yeah, if we try to bury it without processing it turns up, like you walk
Oh
down the
yeah.
street, you have a conversation with someone and they remind you of your mother or whatever, and then you snap. Yeah. You don't want that to happen, and especially in like your relationships with people in your house, like it's going to be full of these triggers of, like people reminding you of someone, and yikes. Yeah.
Well, we know, I'm moving house. I moved house. Hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 times in about 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
And so there's a trigger happening right now.
Absolutely.
And I am remembering, like I'm saying, well, I've packed up all my stuff one weekend. I was about 10. I've packed up all my stuff. Can I go out and play now? And like, no, you can't. You have to help pack up the rest of the house. I know it sounds trivial, but it's right there in my head.
Yeah.
It's right there. Oh, guys, but sounds to me like you do a lot of listening, Heather, a lot of listening. So how is it speaking?
Well, I mean, as you know, I have my own podcast as well,
Yes.
so I'm used to speaking. And actually, even though I do a lot of listening, I do give my perspective, and I give people strategies and tools for how to manage things. It could be using a timer. It could be making agreements with other people about things. It's like, it's really fun to be creative with people and figure out this.
So you have you have the podcast and this new, I guess it's the organization, but the name is K-Doozy, which kind of almost looks like, it kind of looks like it could be a spiritual word, but I know it comes from far more superficial means.
Yeah.
Because I've looked at the website,
Yeah.
K-Doozy, but you could think, oh, it's got some maybe Oriental background to it or
Yeah,
something.
could be.
so I mean, let's not get into the reasons behind the name, but the idea is to engage people in collaboration, as you said, culture. It's culture feedback. And let's be entirely honest. In a Colombian workplace, this is going to be, how will we say, it, it's back. There's a backlog of things that need to be done to reach a certain degree of, let's say, what we would call in the UK corporate social responsibility,
Yeah.
and then of course a healthy workplace. We have a situation in Colombia, I think, is in office workspaces, not all, but I think there's a lot of toxicity. I think there's a very marked hierarchy, not just by class, but the strata system is huge. I think when you get that and people ask you where you live, they're immediately pigeonholing. Again, that happens everywhere, but it's marked here from 1 to 6, and of course 0, the cisben, and so on. It is very marked, and there's this thing as well when if you're getting a job, and sometimes they do a home inspection. Have you heard
Wow.
of this?
No,
I
I
even had
haven't.
I got a job for 2 months before I was eased out. Um, Actually, it was quite toxic, but it wasn't the Colombians. It was
Right.
someone from another part of the world. But let's not go into that. Um, it I had to have someone to come to the house because they wanted to check that the address was where I had put it. And I was just like, this surely isn't legal. That surely isn't. So we're a long way behind on that. And I think where you come in is fascinating, but it's going to be a really interesting journey,
Well,
because how do you get in?
yeah. Well, I don't know when this is going to go out, but on the 27th, I begin teaching a course for the Chamber of Commerce in Bogota.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's going to be 10 sessions, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights. And it's about, they're calling it organizational climate and culture. And I guess I would just have called it culture, organizational culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm super excited to meet businesses and see what they think of what I'm going to present to them. I have road tested it a little bit with Colombians, and people identify these patterns immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, oh, everything's fine. They're like,
Oh, no.
oh, yeah, like they can identify. I mean, same as people in the UK. UK can identify with all of this as well.
Yes.
So I'm really excited to be able to start working with organizations on this and just see what the reaction is from different participants starting Tuesday night.
This will be going out on Tuesday, the 27th. So there you go.
I'm not sure if that's enough time for people to sign up if they wanted
But
to,
that's
but we're supposedly running it again in October.
there you go, October 2025, everyone. But this, you see, I think that there will be a huge reception. I think it will be very well received. And I believe, and I think Colombians are open very much to this. My fear always is if it is then practiced in the long term, not just something that they're ticking off and getting the, what they call here, the cartón, the certificate of attendance. That is my fear. And that's my fear in most places. I was just thinking off the top of my head of like, you be a motivational speaker. And I was thinking, I don't know if you ever saw the UK series of The Office.
Yes.
But there was the one where he was a motivational speaker and came in with his baseball cap on backwards and to the music, "You're simply the best," and then lay on the table, sort of like,
yes.
Is this what's going to happen, Heather? And I can imagine you at the Chamber of Commerce in Chapinero.
Actually, it's going to be on Zoom.
Oh,
so I'm
no.
starting my Colombian career exactly where I have my other career. on Zoom, but I do promise to go to like networking events and stuff like that in
Okay, so
person. And I'm
mm,
currently taking something that the Chamber of Commerce is putting on, which is like a human rights series, like trying to get companies to have
ooh,
human rights policies. And what was
ooh,
so fascinating for me, because the UK, you would not have that. But the way they're selling it is a bit like diversity, equity, and
mm,
inclusion, you know? So I was
really?
really fascinated, and it's great timing for me to be learning about this aspect and what's going on,
Mm,
because it is the way they're doing it is just very much like that. And that's what I do. The
mm,
things around like uh, the effect on communities and the like unions, no, I don't have any clue about that. You know, that isn't, you know, and that's super important in Colombia, of course. But that isn't what my thing is. My thing is the culture of the organization, the business itself. And they do speak to that. You know, they're talking about people with disabilities, etc. And it's interesting that they're framing it as part of human rights, and they're saying this is part of what the UN says we should do, and it's just the UK would never do that.
I no, I don't even want to talk about it. They're only talking about leaving. I don't
Exactly.
even. Human Rights Court, the European Court of Human Rights. I don't even
Yeah.
want to consider it. I think this is fantastic, and I think that because we're in a country that is, I mean, it's visibly, and I use the word trauma again. I think that everybody here at some level has PTSD and has a need to talk and has a need to share and feel those safe spaces. I think you're in the right place at the right time. You'll learn about the unions. Believe me, you'll learn
Yeah.
all about
I
it
do have
because
uncles that do that kind of work and stuff, but for me it's like I want my own experiences now, you know, rather than just hearing about what's happening in Colombia. I want to be living here and experiencing it with everyone else.
I have a I had a very major, let's say, decision. Having lived, it was at the 5 year point as well. I've been here a few more years, but it was at the 5 year point. Was I can no longer be like a bystander. I can no longer say, "Oh, well, that's the way it is. This is how it's what's going on." I need to be involved, and I went straight back in and did the specialism course. So basically, a professional MA in conflict resolution,
Great.
specializing in the Colombian conflict and putting it into context. And that was a watershed moment. It was like, this is where I can no longer be here, only writing sort of great things.
Hmm.
Just still, still great country, still great things,
Yeah.
but I could no longer. So I guess there's a similar thing. Maybe it's the 5 year moment. I
It
don't know.
could be, yeah. And I am interested in looking into the conflict side, because some of what I do is called convergent facilitation. And that is how to bring people together that have very divergent views and perspectives. So you could take Brexit as an example, or you could take vaccines, or any manner of things that you would see in the United States that is polarizing everybody. And you bring people together, and you facilitate a safer space for people to be able to share why they think what they think, like what is important to them. And you get it to kind of a deeper level where people can agree with each other, because we do have universal human needs. We share these with one another. And if we can speak to those needs and agree that those needs are important for each of us, it creates kind of a very fertile common ground from which to have a conversation and have dialogue. And of course, I've not tried it with Colombian conflicts or anything here, but the person who developed this idea, Mickey Cashton, she has done work with Israelis and Palestinians. She's done work with people in the U.S. on abortion. And so there is kind of precedent for trying this out. And I would love to, I am teaching, like Wednesday night, I'll be teaching folks how, like the very basics of convergent facilitation, because it can work in an office as well, like making any decision about something, like where to have your headquarters, or you can even use it for what to eat for dinner tonight. So I would love to be able to, share convergent facilitation with more people so that it can be more widely used, particularly in areas of serious conflict.
In a couple of weeks, and I'm not entirely sure when, but I have people coming on to talk. It's a Colombian foundation that sits people down from very different backgrounds, usually paramilitaries, upper class, Strato Uno, former guerrillas, to discuss their backgrounds. And I find, and I'm looking forward to having that too, to be able to hear the anecdotes directly from the people who've organized it. So
yeah,
I can see you getting into that very much. I can see you. Heather, it has been, I didn't even realize how long we've talked for. It's been fantastic. It's been really, really nice. I like these upbeat conversations and again, you are, for those of you who don't watch us on YouTube, we are on YouTube, but you are beaming positivity through the camera. And so you are a person who is definitely at the right place at this moment in her life and enjoying this new challenge ahead. So congratulations, and long may this continue.
Oh, thank you so much, Richard. It's been a real pleasure to meet you finally, and to be able to share this and hear your own experiences.
Thank you. But remind the listeners where they can find you on various different social platforms.
Well, the best place to start, I guess, is kduz.org, which is KEDUZZ. Should I say Z or Z? I.org, kduz.org. Heather Luna, I'm also on LinkedIn. And I've got a link tree as well, which leads to the podcast and things like that. And that's linktree/kduz.
Perfect. You heard it here first. kduz.org. Heather, thank you so much. Have a great rest of the weekend, and let us know how it all goes.
I will.
Let us know. Come back on in a little time and say, listen, at the Cámara de Comercio, it was just the best, but now they're sending me to Caquetá, they're sending me somewhere else, and I'm going to be a mediator or whatever. It sounds great, Heather, and it's been a real pleasure to listen to you and to meet you here. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you in particular, Heather. Thank you to everyone who's been listening. This has been Colombia Calling. I've been your host, Richard McColl, speaking to Heather Luna, who's in Tenjo, just outside of Bogota. And this has been the Colombia Calling podcast. It's been a great one. So don't go away. Obviously, subscribe, tune in, share, talk about it. If you hate it, let me know. If you love it, let me know. It's the good things, Anyway, thank you again, and goodbye.